Hey everyone, Sean Frangella here for MotionTutorials.net with a new video about an update for C4D R18, the new shadow catcher feature. This episode is brought to you by ArtbeatsEXPRESS. Create a free account at ArtbeatsEXPRESS stock media by subscription and receive complimentary broadcast quality resolution content files. No credit card payments or obligations are required. Click the link for more details. So with the shadow catcher, you can create a brand new type of material that is meant to catch shadows and reflections like we see here and apply it to planes and ground objects so that when you render your file, this black material that we see here will actually be rendered only with the shadows and an alpha channel. So then when you composite it in a compositing app like Photoshop or After Effects, you can get a separate pass of your shadows and reflections and composite everything together with footage or photography to make everything match up. It's a really cool new option for compositing 3D objects into live action footage or photography when you need things sitting on a ground plane. And it's a neat alternative in addition to Cinema 4D for other 3D compositing workflows like multi-pass rendering and using the compositing tag. So here we have the scene, and let's talk about how we would set this up. So I'm just going to delete this shadow catcher material and delete it from this plane. So what we have here is a background that's our footage of this scene and just some objects. And what we would want to do first of all is just line up this grid so everything matches up with the ground plane in this shot and our grid. So we can do that using some of these lines down here. Then we would want to make a plane like I have here and just scale that up to where it is in our scene matching up with our ground in our shot and big enough for our objects. Well, usually we would do a multi-pass render or use the compositing tag and some other tricks to catch our shadows. Well, what we can do now is go to create shader shadow catcher, and this is our new material. And if I open it up, these are the settings so we can catch shadows and or catch reflections, change the shadow strength and shadow color. And what I'm going to do is apply this to our plane. Now, the one other thing we need is a light source. So if I jump out of my camera here and take a look at my scene, I have a light source over here that's an area light set to cast area shadows, and that's the direction from which the shadows are going to be cast onto this plane. So it is important that one step you need is you do need a light in your scene or lights, because that's what's going to actually create the shadow. Now, if all we want to do is catch the shadows and use our default strength and color, that's fine. The other thing we need to do is go to our render settings, and we'd want to save this if we're just doing a still render or an animation. So I'm going to save this as Shadow Catcher 03, and I'll do shadows. We'll catch the shadows with this first one. And I want to check on alpha channel because that's really important, because that's what's going to make this material transparent and we'll catch our shadows. Now, my background I was just using for reference, so I'll actually just turn that off. I wouldn't need that to show up in this workflow. And then I'm just going to do Shift R to render to our picture viewer. So here we have our shot. It doesn't look like anything different than it typically would, but if we go to layer, we have our background image and we can click single pass and we have an alpha channel. We can see it's actually catching the shadows. And now if we go locate that file in Finder, we could open it up in Photoshop or After Effects, and we can see it has our alpha channel and it's catching our shadows. So we could just copy that and paste it into our scene. And there we have our shadows on our object composited together. Now, we'd obviously need to do a lot more. We need to match our reflections and materials, but the shadow catcher is a good start and a good new feature. Now, we could customize a little more. There's no shadows usually that harsh and that black, so we could change our shadow strength. We could change our colors. We could give it kind of more of a dark bluish like we would see. We could render that again, replace, that's fine. And same thing, it's gonna render our image and our alpha channel. So if we open up that same file, there we get the difference, and we can see we got blue shadow. So there are some customization options for this feature. Now we could also catch reflections. In addition to that, say that this was a more reflective surface besides just sidewalk, or let's just pretend like it is. Well, we could open up our shadow material. I'm gonna check off shadows and check on catch reflections. And then I'm going to save this as a different file, so we'll get one for it, just our reflections. So I'll call this Shadow Catcher 03 Reflections. Shift R to render that to our picture viewer. And now we can see we get a different render where we have our image with our reflections and our alpha channel. And we could open that one up, and copy paste it and put it behind our shadow layer, and even take the transparency down a little bit and blur it if we needed to in Photoshop, since we're in Photoshop for compositing and do our blurs in post-production. So that's all cool for a still render. If we wanted to do animation, we could do the same workflow. So let's just create one little animation real quick here. Let's just say that this one sphere just animates up. So we'll put a keyframe on Y, and then we'll go to frame 15 and just animate it up. And we'll change our work area to just 15 frames. And let's open this back up, uncheck reflections and check cast shadows. Maybe turn that back up a bit. Change this to 04 reflections animation. And we'll just go to our render settings and go to output all frames. And then we'll do Shift R and we'll render out an animation in the same way. And if we jumped over into After Effects and brought that in as this PNG sequence, we could layer that on top of the footage, and if we take a look, we can see that shadow is going to properly animate and move across the ground. Now, there are a couple limitations currently. It's important to note that it's not going to take into account the shadow color on our light and density. You need to set that up on the shadow catcher. And right now, it does render in the picture viewer and area render as this black. So it's just important to note that when it does render out, in our picture viewer, if you take a look at layer and go to single pass, you can see that alpha channel. So it's a cool new addition to Cinema 4D R18 for our 3D compositing options. Now, it's definitely meant to be an additional option. It's by no means a complete replacement of the other methods using multipass and compositing tags. So if you want to check out the other workflows for setting this type of thing up in Cinema 4D, if we had moving footage or a little more complicated needs, be sure to check out the other videos I have for setting this up as a multi-pass render with a shot that has a moving camera, as well as how to set it up using a compositing tag and composite background settings. If you want to see some alternate ways to do something similar to this, but to get slightly different results and different customization options. And if you want to check out more new features for Cinema 4D R18, be sure to check out motiontutorials.net, where I have full breakdowns on all of the new features, including my top 5 new features, MoGraph updates, the new thin film shader, the awesome new Voronoi fracture, and more new features. And don't forget to check out some of the new Cinema 4D products I have in the online store at motiontutorials.net/store, where you can pick up Cinema 4D templates, lighting and rendering assets, and new packs for 360 Environment Maps Pro, which are packs of 8K environment photos, assets, and a Cinema 4D templates to quickly and easily make your 3D scenes look awesome. If you have any questions on this tutorial or any of my other new feature tutorials, be sure to follow me on Twitter. I'm at Frangella, and check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/motiontutorials. I love hearing from fans of the videos and talking about all these new features. And if you want a quick dose of other new features for R18, be sure to check out the other R18 videos I have up on YouTube by clicking on any of those thumbnails that are popping up there now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next video.